Look at these temperatures. These are from Cooler Master's NCore 100 Max, a mini-itx case that allows you to have a cool vertical PC on your desktop. If you're one for small-ish PCs, do carry on watching. Hey tech people, Melvin here. I actually have this case sitting around for a while now, so I should not leave it around for too much longer. The NCore 100 Max comes in two colors, which are bronze, and this light grey, which I have over here. It is slightly taller than the Asus TUF RTX 4080 Super, and compared to the usual PC cases, only takes up a small square on your desktop. But don't let its size fool you. With all the metal panels and a full aluminum body, it does feel really heavy even when it is almost bare. I can't imagine how much heavier it would be when you have a full PC built inside. The metal covers feel very premium and smooth to the touch, and the grills help with the airflow. With such a tight case, you need all the airflow to cool this PC. The NCore 100 Max stands up quite well on these two rubber platforms, and despite its size and height, does not wobble or look unsteady. But let's see how it is again with a full build inside. The start button is located at the front of the case. The front panel is located at the bottom, and it has two Type A ports, one Type-C port, and one mic earphone combo jack port. And there are stickers on both panels to tell you how to remove these panels. Though it can be a bit hard to understand, there is actually a specific way to remove these panels. To remove these panels, you have to pull them away from you. There are mesh filters on the insides on both panels, which help with the management of dust in the system. There's quite an amount of heft on the panels, which makes the case heavy but also strong at the same time. I like that every cable is well organized and bundled up to allow you to install the rest of the PC parts easily. Oh yes, you also need to remove this brace burst. Very easy, just rotate the top and bottom ends to the open position. And next, the first thing you'll see is how much room you have for a mini-itx case and where most of the mess actually comes from. The front of the NCore is where you put a motherboard, and at the back, you can put up to a full-size triple-fan graphics card. The overall build feels very sturdy and well designed to be able to support the pre-installed PC parts and whatever that you have in mind for a PC build. The NCore 100 Max has its own 850W small form factor power supply as well as a 120mm AIO. Most of the cables such as a 24-pin, 8-pin CPU power and 12V high power cables come pre-installed on this power supply. One thing to note, the power rating for the 12V high power cable is 450W and not the standard 600W on full-size ATX 3.0 power supplies. You can still put the RTX 4090 in there, but do take note of your graphics card's power consumption during loads. That said, if you plan to not use the 12V high power cable, you can swap it out for the 8-pin PCIe cables. The power cord is affixed at the back of the case. And as for the CPU cooler, it comes with a 2400 RPM pump, a 120mm radiator. You can see that the radiator on this 120mm AIO is thicker than usual, which adds to the height of this case. The cooling tubes on the AIO are of a good length and are braided, which I think is super because you need to twist a lot to fit onto the CPU. There's also a 120mm single flow 1800 RPM fan for exhaust. From what I remember, the single flow fan aren't really quiet fans, but you just have to make do with this fan for better cooling performance in this case. There's also a PCI Gen 4 riser, which allows you to install your graphics card at the back. Because of where your motherboard has to be, the riser has to go underneath and behind the motherboard to reach your GPU. Okay, one thing here. If you're going to ask about my cable management, you have to hold off on that because I have to repack this and send them off to other reviewers. I'm just going to leave most of the cables as to where they were at the start and not do any fancy cable management. With that out of the way, let's put the motherboard in. I have set up an Asus ROG X670E-I with a Ryzen 9 7950X, 32GB of G-Skill Trident Z5 DDR5 RAM and 1TB SSD. You have to wiggle the motherboard with all the I/O and power cables. Next, screw the standoff screws in. Now that the board is in, I'm going to plug in the riser cable into the PCI slot first. Because of where the cable is and the length it has, it will be a snug fit into this PCI slot. The next part is slightly more troublesome. There is only the amount of space and way for the I/O cables to go in. I had to try a few times to find the best way to plug in the USB Type-A cable. That said, I'm thankful that Cooler Master chose to combine the front panel I/O leads into one piece to make it easier to plug into the front panel header on your motherboard. And don't forget about the Type-C cable. Both the USB Type-A and Type-C cables do stick out because of the height of the head and the angle of the cables, but there should be no problem putting the front panels back. Just make sure to keep them tight and neat. and there's no onboard audio on this board, so we are not going to use the front panel audio cable. Next, I'm going to plug in the power cable for the CPU and motherboard. Nice to see that 8-pin CPU cable is of the appropriate length, neither too long nor too short to reach the motherboard. The 24-pin cable goes in pretty well too. And next, I'm going to plug in the wires for the pump fan and the exhaust fan. Okay, for the final part, at least for the front, is to install the AIO water block. Before you do so, make sure to reinstall the socket brackets if you do not have them on the motherboard. Next, screw both AMD tripods onto the water block. And because there's no thermal paste on the copper block, you will have to put on your own thermal paste. Very important, make sure to peel off this sticker before installing the water block onto the CPU. It's very easy to install this water block. Just latch on the clips onto these socket bracket hooks and screw the water block down. There is no need for a screwdriver. And remember to plug in the pump lead onto the motherboard pump header. At this juncture, if you have a 2.5-inch SSD, there's place for one at the bottom and the screw points are at the back of the case. Alright, we have completed the front installation. Let's move on to the back of the case. There are two modes, Mode A for smaller size graphic cards and Mode B for bigger size graphic cards. This picture shows you what kind of graphic cards you can have for the NCore 100 Max. If you have a regular size card, you can just install it as per every other PC build. Remove the PCI slot brackets, plug in the GPU into the riser cable, and reinstall the slot screws. And as mentioned earlier, use the provided 8-pin PCI cables. However, if you have a card like this ASUS TUF RTX 4080 Super, it is not that simple. Time for Mode B. There is more to be done. You may begin by removing the PCI slot tray and the standoffs. Remove the PCIe riser cable and its standoffs. Move the standoffs to one notch below the original position and reinstall the riser cable onto the new position. We also need to move the PCI slot tray. Move it to the lower position and reinstall both screws. With that, we finally have space for a big size graphics card. Align the GPU and insert it onto the riser cable and you will hear a click. Align the GPU again to reinstall the PCIe slot screws. The last step is to plug in the 12-volt high power cable. I'm not a fan of this because you have to twist the cable so much to fit onto the GPU. And as we all know, it's very important to have this power cable fully flushed onto the graphics card. I understand that the cable sleeving is strong enough to withstand such twists, but it is the least inside the power housing that is more sensitive. I wish Cooler Master will create perhaps a 90-degree adapter for this, or maybe realign the direction of the power cable to fit the graphics card. Okay, we are done with the inside. But we have to reconfigure the outside to allow this case to stand better with this extra weight. First step, you can remove the back brace first. Next, unscrew and remove one of the feet. Reposition the feet on the outer pair of screw holes and fasten them down. Third step, reinstall the back brace onto the outer pair of holes. Fourth, put back the front brace and lock it into position. And you can finish up by putting the front and back panels back. It was actually much harder to close the panels because you have all these cables everywhere with a graphics card installed. So make sure to tie down your cables, manage them better to make it a lot easier to close the front and back. And because of the increased width of this case, I also have to mention that it was a bit of a challenge to align the tabs on the panels to the braces to close out this case. Oh yes, it's a lot heavier now. I did mention that you can reach the power points easily because it is affixed here. As for the HDMI or DP ports, because of where the GPU is, you have to plug the cable at the bottom and route it to your monitor. Well, it actually isn't that bad. In fact, it looks better because your HDMI or DP cable is hidden at the bottom. Okay, the PC is up, everything is working. I have the latest drivers for Windows. Let's go Cinebench. If you did not catch it at the start of the video, the 7950X ran at an average of 93 to 94 degrees, with the highest at 95.2 degrees C, with the room capped at 24 degrees C. That's a delta of 68 to 69 degrees C, with a max of 71.2 degrees C. Temperatures are high, but still okay, because that's how the 7950X will push at Cinebench, and it's still within the maximum operating temperature. I think the temps are akin to a 240mm AIO, but it should not be a problem because you will not experience such temperatures in-game. So I would not recommend a 7950X inside anyway. Even though this is a slightly thicker than usual 120mm AIO, I would recommend at least a 280mm or best a 360mm for a 7950X. If you really want to use a 7950X, another way is to set a 90 degrees C limit in the BIOS. The CPU operated slightly better at a delta below 66 degrees C with a max of 67.6 degrees C. If you're thinking, is there any performance loss? Well, there exactly isn't. In fact, the cores on the 750X had high clock speeds while maintaining a lower temperature at the same power usage. This gave rise to an almost 1000 point difference between the two Cinebench runs. Well, on the other hand, the 4080 Super ran at an average of almost 50 degrees C with a max of almost 60 degrees C. This is a delta of 26 degrees C with a max of almost 36 degrees C. This is pretty good considering the fact that this is a pretty enclosed space and there's only one fan to exhaust all of the heat out of the system. Well, I also have to mention about the noise. Yes, I was right. It was loud, at least to me. I did not manage to capture the noise, but even with the panels on, you can hear the exhaust fan and the pump working really hard to exhaust the heat out. And thankfully, it was slightly less loud when we dropped the temperatures in the BIOS. I like this case. It's relatively easy to build in, it looks good, and it sort of takes up only a small space on your desk. The NCore 100MX is almost a showpiece, but it's not too glam up that it looks like an absurd rainbow puke fest on your tabletop. But that said, besides the kinks in the wiring and the amount of noise that you will experience, another issue is you are stuck with this cooler and power supply. It is not exactly an issue if you're okay with the preset choices in this case. But if you are one who likes to choose the parts to the very end, this case may not be the one for you. And because it already comes with a power supply and cooler, the NCore 100MX is not exactly a very affordable case. So give or take between looking nice and functional versus highly priced and less customization. You decide. Okay, if you like this video, make sure to smash the like button. Comment down below if you want to buy this case, and make sure to subscribe to my channel for more awesome tech content. Bye.